Night Bites, brought to you by your instructional coaches. This Night Bite is the beginning of a series focused on K-2 of the book Shifting the Balance. Liz and Nancy will be sharing chapter highlights from the 6 chapters of this book that focus on the science of reading and how we can incorporate that into our balanced literacy instruction. We plan on sharing some helpful tips along with the research and how to adapt with the materials that we have. Our focus in Chapter 1 is Rethinking How Reading Comprehension Begins. This chapter presents 4 different misunderstandings. I am just going to zoom in on number 4, which is that successful comprehension in beginning reading texts means that reading comprehension is on track. So this book digs into the why that we need to look further beyond reading comprehension just at the guided reading level. The science supporting this is that students' listening comprehension abilities far exceed their decoding abilities, so we definitely need to be making sure that we are honing in on their comprehension skills in books other than just their guided reading books. And as their decoding develops, their reading comprehension can meet their level of listening comprehension at some point in time. So we want to make sure that we've developed that reading comprehension so that when they get there with their decoding, they're all good to go. When listening comprehension is not developed, there are statistics that show students have a dip in reading comprehension right around that 3rd grade level. That really shows that if we're focusing more on comprehension only in their guided reading books, that we are not giving them the depth of thinking that they need to have to be successful as upper level readers. Therefore, my little starred note at the bottom here is that it's key to hone in on language development and listening comprehension in the primary grades. Now, I know many of you do this and do read alouds and talk about thinking, but they suggested in this book, the practice to reconsider is that to revisit your read alouds and highlight and build vocabulary, develop language through conversation and building background knowledge, and focusing on text sets and connections between them. The celebration is that we can do this using the materials that we already have. So we're going to just take a quick look at the lesson card from your interactive read alouds and talk about how you can go into these cards to support that listening comprehension in a way that supports the science of reading. On your lesson cards, there are several goals listed. You are able to have the freedom to choose which goals it is that you choose to talk about. But there is always a vocabulary goal. Right there you can see that it is boxed out in green. So for this particular book, it tells you which vocabulary words to talk about during your read aloud and to use that academic language in talking about literary features, also developing language development here. The read aloud sometimes might be worth talking about more than one time. You can go back and revisit once you're done. And on the last page of the lesson card, which is on the back, there's some tips on comprehension and language that you can use, as well as going back in and talking about the vocabulary. I know there's a lot on the lesson cards. You can use the parts and pieces that you see fit. I know we focused a lot on the within, beyond, and about, which is definitely important, but then consider this piece as well in developing that vocabulary and that conversational language. The suggestion also talked about having connected books. Well, we have that. How amazing that we have books that are set in groups of 4 or 5, all based around one theme. This particular series that I chose as an example has the theme of questions and answers. For that series of books, there is one card that kind of talks about all of the books in one viewpoint, I guess you could say, and it's got an essential question for you to focus on and then carry that idea through all 4 of your books. That's another excellent way to build that connection and those text-to-text connections among your books. It's right there for you, questions and prompts and things to think about. So a practice to try in building some of that language in talking about books. This was recommended in modeling how we can talk about books and building upon what students have said. It's called using dialogic conversations to develop oral language, and the focus is repeating and expanding. So the example that's given here shows that when you ask a question to your student, such as, what was your favorite part of the book? They might answer it with a simple answer. So then what your job is to do is to repeat what they say and expand upon it. So you might say, oh, when the mouse saved the lion, that's so surprising. How do you think the mouse felt? And instead of just asking the second question, you're repeating what they said and adding more. It builds upon the language and making the conversation authentic. It shows interest and it helps them to understand some of that intentional language that can be used when you're having conversations. Maybe they'll start to add more as they're starting to share their thoughts and ideas about books. We said we'd close with tying this into the Illinois Comprehensive Literacy Plan. If you take a look right here, we've got the 7 components of literacy that are covered in the plan. And what we're talking about today is definitely comprehension, but also oracy. And you might be wondering, what is that? I don't really know that word. So the definition of oracy is pretty lengthy. You can take a moment to read it here. And I highlighted the fact that you're building that rich vocabulary, understanding complex syntax that you can build through your conversation, and honing in on comprehension through that dialogue. That is really critical in when you are doing your read alouds, that you are hitting these components so that you're building that background knowledge and that ability to talk about books, in addition to reading and understanding and enjoying the story. This is just an example of what that comprehensive literacy plan looks like, where it talks about the practices that you should be doing on the left and what not to be doing on the right. And these are all within that category of oracy. So having structured discussions, developing oral language, engaging students in that spoken language with vocabulary, constructing sentences and improving their grammar, and utilizing those read alouds for storytelling and enhancing comprehension. Take a quick moment to look over here as to what is not recommended in these 3 areas. Okay, I hope that we've brought to you a little bit of background on the science of reading and how you can use what you have to tweak or improve in order to help students progress in their reading abilities. If you are interested in this book, the other areas that were mentioned within the chapter that were considered misunderstandings are reading comprehension begins with print. Understanding spoken language and understanding written language are 2 different things. And if children have strong oral language, they have most of what they need to learn to read. So lots to think about for us, just kind of digging into some professional development as we are in our language arts review cycle and trying to make sure we're doing the best that we can with the great materials that we have. Stay tuned for your next Night Bite. Take a peek at the email for resources that are related to this Night Bite. And as always, reach out if you're looking to work together or need any support.